Taylor Ryan, and this is Mainly Unspoken. Today we're going to be discussing the book, A Place Called Waco. And our guest tonight is the mother of the author of the book, Belinda Gainan.
That's right, Belinda Gainan.
And your son is David Thibodeau, and he was one of the 9 survivors from the Waco assault.
That's right.
Back in 1993.
April 19th,
April 19th.
1993.
When I talk to a lot of people on the street, or even my friends, and I talk about Waco, they seem to be under the impression that it was a cult, and in the end they ended up killing themselves, setting their place on fire, shooting themselves, and it was just suicide. Is that what happened?
Well, that's not my experience of it, and I'm really glad that you said that in sort of a sequence of setting themselves on fire and shooting themselves, and because each little possibility sort of needs to be looked at individually. I went to Waco the day after the assault began. My brother and I got on a plane and we were there the next day because I had started talking to one of the action teams in Texas, and the FBI agent that I spoke to really made me feel very clearly that this was sort of, it was their thing. There was something of an experimentation going on. I had wanted them to allow family voices, to allow me to talk to my son, because I was in touch with my son on a regular basis, had been planning to go out there to see him and to meet the community. And I really wanted to get a chance to talk to David while this, whatever it was happening, because of course we didn't know. I mean, there was the news, and this, you know, it was clearly his community that was under this attack.
Now, when you said it was an experimental thing, what did you...
Well, when I spoke to the first FBI agent, I said to him, you know, I need to get my voice in there. I want to speak to my son. I mean, I don't know what's going on, but I know how he feels about his community, and you know, he may not just walk out the door because you're asking him to, and if my son is under fire and there's a possibility that my son is going to be killed, I want to speak to him. You know, I want to let him know that I'm here for him. I want him to tell me what I need to do to help him. And the FBI agent said to me, maybe in the future, if we experience something like this again, we might consider allowing family intervention, but this time we're not going to allow any family voices. So it was real clear to me from the very beginning that some things had been in place, and that was pretty much justified for me when I first started going to the every morning they would have press conferences for the press, where the FBI agents in charge would stand up and give sort of a comprehensive composite of how things were going and exactly what was happening. And when I realized from the very beginning that some of the things that they were saying were not truthful, I just, you know, it really sort of set in my mind this reality that something about this has already been planned and decisions have been made in advance. And what I mean when I say that was, the very first day that I was at one of the press conferences, Bob Ricks, who was the primary sort of propaganda frontman for the FBI, said, "Oh, these people are a cult, and they live, you know, they live in isolation out here. They have no families. They're estranged from their families, or they've been cut out by their families, or they've left their families behind entirely." And I knew that wasn't true, because when I first started calling Waco, I started with the sheriff's department, and the phones were being rung off the hook, and they were bringing in new phones, and they were going to open up an entire room to put in phone lines because families were calling from all over the world because of the concern about what was happening. So I knew that, in my heart, I knew that there was a chance that something had been, decisions had been made in advance, and so
they didn't want the families contacting
that's
the people
right. They didn't want that. They wanted complete control of that situation.
They wanted them to be isolated.
Oh yeah,
because they could control them more.
Right, and when they were willing to lie about it from the very first day, I knew that there was a real challenge and a real battle at hand for us as families.
But why would they do that?
You know, because this was the first time. It was the first time that they've handled a situation like this on U.S. ground, and I knew that they had just had Ruby Ridge. Ruby Ridge was an FBI action that was in front of the television cameras. There had been a number of actions around the country in which people who had sort of pit themselves against the government were under assault by the FBI. Very little was known about it, very little coverage, and various things happened. A number of people were killed, houses were bombed, and that.
But the Branch Davidians, and that was the name of the community, right?
Actually, they call themselves Students of the Seven Seals. The name of the community was called Mount Carmel.
Mount Carmel.
Yeah.
Okay. Where did Branch Davidians come from?
Branch Davidian came from, this community had for about 70 years.
How many years?
70. They'd been in Waco for 70 years. And they'd been sort of an adjunct of the Seventh-day Adventists. They were part of the Seventh-day Adventist community. They had broken off because there were a couple of things that they did not agree with in regard to the doctrine. One is Sunday service. They wanted to restore Saturday service, Sabbath service, like as practiced in the Old Testament. And because they take most of their doctrine from the Old Testament, and they also believe that certain things are going to happen, in this century as predicted by their original prophet Ellen G. White. And so there were all kinds of little factions of Seventh-day Adventism that were sort of sprouting off at different times. At one time they thought that the world was going to end. So these people came from California to Waco, Texas. And when the world didn't end, they created a big dairy farm. And they ran a dairy farm for decades because they're
the Mount Carmel.
Right, the Mount Carmel people. They were vegetarians, and so the Branch Davidians was sort of the name given to that community originally because they were considered a branch of the Seventh-day Adventist, whole.
Okay, so the people at Mount Carmel, they belonged to a very established religion. Okay, it wasn't a very worldwide religion where,
no.
But it was an established.
Oh yeah, long established.
With deep roots.
Most of the people in there were, a good sort of core group of those people had their parents, their grandparents, and their great-grandparents had been from that community.
So generations have been involved.
Generations. And then other people came in from all over, not just the Seventh-day Adventist community in the United States, but the world. They had Hawaii, New Zealand, Australia, the UK. So people were coming from everywhere at this time to study under David Koresh.
Did the people of Waco get along with the people of Mount Carmel?
Yes.
They did?
Yes. They were considered, sort of an eccentric group. Waco, Texas is a rather eccentric sort of Texas community. They're very proud of their Wild West past, and it's a place where people sort of, come to settle, to be their individual selves. They had always gotten along with that community, and for years, I think that Greater Waco had, taken a lot of their food resources from that community when it was a farming community. And at this point in time, when David Koresh is there building the community, and the community's much younger at this time, and practicing a much more active sort of spiritual life, that they did get along very well with the Waco community. I wouldn't say that they were like, weren't on the community service board, but they were established.
Peacefully.
Yes, established and peaceful.
Did David Koresh, did he come in as the leader, or was he an everyday member and then rose to the leadership?
Yeah, he had been born into that community. His mom,
was born into
his mother had been, and his grandmother had been members of the community at different parts, in their life, had come and gone. I think his mom broke away from the community for a while. She had him when she was very young. She was a very young mother. And when he went back into that community, he was pretty much taken under the wing of a woman named Lois Roden, who at that time was the prophet of that community. And the Seventh-day Adventists believe in living prophetship, so they have designated sort of prophets in various groups, and she was considered like a prophet in that group. And she ran the group. She and her husband had basically run that group for a number of decades. She was elderly, and as she determined that her son was not mentally competent to sort of lead this community, this religious community, she had gotten really into David, because David was young. He knew the Bible verbatim. He'd learned it by heart.
Wow.
A lot of energy, a lot of willingness, to learn, a lot of enthusiasm for the community. And I think he wanted to be a leader. I mean, I have no doubt whatsoever that when it was clearly established that she would take him under her wing and develop him and sort of, cultivate him for this role of leadership. I'm sure he wanted it. He'd had a very rough life, a lot of family abuse, a lot of rejection, and I think he was looking for his place of, importance. He was a musician. Like a lot of other people.
Like a lot of other people. So it's nothing unusual.
No, it's not. It wasn't at all. And, and I think over time, as he was given power, and he was given more power and more power, and the community grew, and it's a very, vivacious community. A lot of artists, a lot of music, a lot of just, and plus their whole, religious ideology. I think that they really thought that they were going to change the world, and they had the right message. And as the community is growing, and he's gaining in power, and I think, like a lot of people, it became very important to him. It became very seductive, and I think that there are areas in which he...
When you say seductive, though, that sounds cult-like, though.
Well, power's seductive. Having people adore you and having people learn from you is a seductive thing. And
Did David ever force, like your son David, okay, did he put any pressure on your son to stay at Mount Carmel?
See, I don't think that works with intelligent people. I don't think that you can pressure intelligent people or free-thinking people to do or to do anything or to stay anywhere. And I think that that's one of the sort of messages that's really lost in this whole Waco thing, is that these people were extremely intelligent people. They all saw themselves as free thinkers. They came into that community under his teaching and all felt that they were learning something that they wanted to commit to.
Okay, so they weren't seduced into it.
Well, what I meant by this, there's the seduction of just the beauty of it. I mean, there were beautiful people, lots of children, lots of artists. They had their own rock band. They had a couple of, their own businesses that they ran. They worked really hard.
So what was seductive was the lifestyle.
And I think the ability to constantly be raising your own levels, to be constantly meeting a goal, be constantly getting more control of yourself, constantly learning to just, what do I want to say,
It was a challenging community, and it was a supportive community.
Right.
And if anyone wanted to leave, they could. Did they have to?
I believe that, yeah, definitely.
You do believe that?
Oh, yeah, because my son spent almost 1.5 years deciding to go in. He studied with them for quite a while in California and Los Angeles, and then he decided to go out to Waco with them.
I want you to hold that spot, but I think we have your son on the phone.
Oh, I hope so.
Well, why don't you finish,
okay,
and then we'll pick up.
Because when he went to Waco, he lived outside of the community for a few months before finally making the decision to go in. And we talked about this. This is another thing that's lost. Well, my son was making this decision to come into this community. We were talking about it a lot because it wasn't something that I would do. The communal thing I really approved of. I had lived in a commune for a while when I was younger, gave it a try. I lasted for a month, but that part I was really enthusiastic with. Going into a sort of a Bible community, that wasn't my thing. It wasn't my belief. He wasn't raised with the Bible per se. He was always raised with sort of the the golden rule, and what ill you do to people will follow you threefold, and free to think and to make his own religious decisions. But going into a Bible group was a little,
different.
It was a bit upsetting for me, but it was his decision.
And he has a different life than you, and he has different needs than you.
Right, and that's why I made an attempt to get to know people in the community, because, I wanted to know who the people who he was going to be cohabiting with, the people that he was studying with. Oh, they were wonderful.
They were wonderful.
Absolutely wonderful,
Right.
Yeah. They were fabulous.
David, can you hear me? Hello? David? 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 Oh, it won't go on. Oh, hang up. Oh, we're going to try again.
He'll call right back.
Okay. Well, that's the important thing to remember, though, is that you loved the people. You felt Did you actually talk to David Koresh?
I talked to David Koresh on the telephone a number of times. because he liked my son David a lot. He wanted me to come out and visit the community. I had planned to go out there that May. The first assault was February 28th. And I was going to be going out in the early spring to meet them because my son had married within the community. He had married David Koresh's wife's sister. So he was sort of part of that, you know, inner community. And I had met some of the people in California when I would go out and visit my son in Los Angeles when he was in music school. So I knew people. I liked them. I had a correspondence with one of the young women who lost her life with her 5 children inside Mount Carmel. And we wrote, you know, and my daughter-in-law wrote to me. And so over time I was getting to know them and, you know, getting to, you know.
So the bottom line is that you didn't feel it was a cult.
No, I never felt it was a cult, but I never knew a lot about it as well.
Okay, and you never knew, but your son would come home after being, and he seemed fine?
Oh, he was fine, yeah.
Okay, so even though the religious aspect was different than what you expected, everything appeared okay.
Yeah, I mean, I could never have lived there myself, but I would never have told David, or, you know, even tried to tell David that it was terrible and he shouldn't be there. That would be his decision. Okay. He would make his own decisions.
So we have this community. It's a religious community. It's a very religious community. They've been around for 70 years.
Go.
They're getting fined. Thank you, Jason. Is it working? David!
Yes.
Oh, I'm so glad we have you on the phone.
Hi, David.
Good to be here. How you doing?
Oh, Dave, I'm so glad you're here with us.
Hey, Mother.
We are talking about your book, A Place Called Waco, and I read it. It's an excellent book, very detailed, so it really gets into the religious aspect of the thinking and all the details of what went on there. I told your mom that most people today still think of the Waco assault as a bunch of cult members who killed themselves.
Sure, you've been conditioned to think that.
Yeah, and what do you have to say about that?
Like I just said, you've basically been conditioned to think that. I mean, when there is so much at stake for the powers that be, they're going to do anything they can to demonize the group of people. For example, the ATF. Well, the best way I can say it, I'll just quote Senator Henry Clay. Basically said, the devices of power and its minions are the same in all countries and in all ages. It marks its victim, denounces it, exciting the public hatred so it can conceal its own abuses and encroachments. Now, you know, the FBI knew for a fact that the ATF, when they went in on the first day, on February 28th, with the helicopters and just the way they did, they violated so many laws and constitutional laws that they had to cover themselves. And that's all they could do was demonize David Koresh and the people to the point where, you know, eventually they would have public support to go in and do what they did, and that is gas the kids and you know, gas the people.
So they did not commit suicide?
No.
And you did not...
I'm sure that there were some people that were trapped in areas of the building that may have taken their own lives out of mercy, if nothing else.
Because they were going to be burned to death.
The autopsy reports of about 30 of the individuals are not conclusive to suicide. It's more conclusive to walking out and being shot than it would be to taking your own life.
Now, what I kind of understand is that, you know, your mother described it was a peaceful community, a religious community, where it's been around for 70 years. But what I kind of understand is, why did the government stop picking on you guys?
Well, you know, there definitely was, as far as the government's concerned, you know, fuel for that fire. There was several children out there that David had fathered by a number of the different women. You know, that's not exactly something that's accepted in society. But
so then why didn't they just pick up David when he was in Waco?
Well, exactly. It's not a federal issue is the key here, and the state authorities did investigate, and they had to drop their case. They didn't have the evidence. Simply to me, David Koresh gave them so many opportunities to get him outside running in front of the house. He went to town, and the FBI tried to say he never left, he was a recluse, and it just wasn't true. There were several people in the community that came forward that said they saw Koresh shopping. You know, they definitely the ATF needed some kind of PR campaign. They wanted to go in and, here's an easy target, a group of people that basically all live together, could demonize easily and go in and get this big cache of arms and, make it look good when their budget comes up in the next couple of months, as it was.
So they just did it, they murdered all those people at Mount Carmel to increase their budget?
Well, I think of the original attack, I don't think anyone foresaw the ending, including us on the inside. No one really foresaw that was going to happen. Once the point had come that the ATF assaulted Mount Carmel and did what they did, definitely, I think, plans and initiatives changed on the other end. For example, as I said earlier, we have eyewitnesses of the helicopters firing into the building. That would have been an illegal act because there were not supposed to be any guns or agents with guns firing from the helicopters.
But were you firing
as a diversionary tactic?
Were you assaulting them? I mean, why were they firing at you?
They make it sound like David Koresh and a group of people went out and personally went to the ATF office and started shooting. That's the perception they like the people to have. The bottom line is they came in with malice and attacked and shot people at the front door and basically started this whole insane period of life back in 1993 in Waco, Texas. And it all not only could have been avoided, it should have been avoided. David Koresh invited the undercover agent in on several occasions, and they had a chance to come in and view any of the firearms they had in question. David gave them that window of opportunity, and they chose not to do that.
Why did you guys have firearms?
Sure. That's a question that a lot of people ask. It's asked over and over. There were some people within the community, an interesting turn of events. We met a man named Henry McMahon, and he was a licensed firearms dealer out of Hewitt. Now, I know how it is up there in New England, because I grew up there, but down in Texas, it's the whole gun consciousness is quite a bit different. A lot of people down here have firearms. People used to come out from other bands that actually played out in Waco, and they shoot at our firing range. A lot of the younger guys, well, 2 or 3 of the younger guys started to go to gun shows with Henry. They started to learn the business, and being businessmen, they took that up. That's just something that was kind of presented to them. So they started to go to gun shows and buy and sell legally with all the yellow sheets and whatnot.
So it was a business to earn money to make Waco, to make Mount Carmel run, because the community needed money to live on, right?
Yeah, well, there were several businesses going on. I mean, there were several talented people that lived there.
Oh, okay.
We had a guy that was a computer expert that worked for IBM. We had just various, a Harvard-educated attorney, Wayne Martin, lived out there. So it wasn't a bunch of lazy idiots that just wanted to study Bible and hang out. These are very motivated people. They absolutely believed in the Scripture and believed in the events to come in Revelation, as well as everything that's happened from Genesis to Revelation. And to them, they just simply saw more from David than they had seen from the TV preachers or any teachers they had had all their lives, and they wanted to be there to learn these things.
And so basically the government was trying to pick up David Koresh because he had more than one wife.
Well, legally, that would not be a standing for them. The only legal grounds that they had, if you read any of the Justice Department reports that go through that go through the whole scenario, the only real cause that they had was a suspicion of David Koresh manufacturing fully automatic weapons, which are illegal only if you don't pay a $200 tax and register with the BATF. And so that was their suspicion.
Just a suspicion. And were they afraid that he was going to take those automatic weapons and use it against the town of Waco or something, or some government?
Well, I think that what happens is when you do an investigation, and I don't know to the full extent of what their ulterior motives were. What I do know is from having my perspective, getting out of the building and spending the last 8 years, if you will, involved in research and really wanting to know what happened from all sides, being totally open to the subject. I basically found that I just think that they just messed up. It shouldn't have been like that. Maybe there was a little too much testosterone going on the other side.
You know,
Go ahead.
David, you know, one of the things that I think that gets forgotten as well is the fact that the BATF was escalating to do the big, what do I want to say, intervention up in Montana at Church Universal and Triumphant. And I think that's a huge community. And I've thought about it pretty seriously too, Dave. And I just think that Waco was a dry run for cut, and that they thought that they could go in and take the community, secure your community, and take everything, get everyone all nicely nestled in jail, and then they would, that would be like a real big dress rehearsal for going up to Montana, because they had launched a massive investigation on the Montana group, especially when they found out that they were trying to buy a tank.
Yeah.
So it's like, and plus you've got Ruby Ridge going on, and so you've got this, it just seems like this step 1, 2, 3.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up, was Ruby Ridge. I mean, that happened about 6 months before our incident, and we saw some of the same tactics that they used. I mean, at one point, they were flying a helicopter over Randy Weaver's cabin that had an attachment on it, and luckily a cameraman or someone from the press noticed that, knew what it was, and said, what, are they planning to dump fuel on the cabin and burn them out? And they didn't go forward with that. But that was actually one of their plans in Ruby Ridge. I mean, Ruby Ridge should definitely be studied. It was something that happened in this nation, I think, for the first time, that got people to kind of wake up and really start to question the government. And Waco, of course, was, if you will, the battle cry that went out to thousands, if not tens of thousands of people throughout the country, obviously forming the militia movement. It's kind of like there's just this, they're just looking to test, to see how far they've come from getting our mind unfocused on what this nation truly is. And this nation started out as a thought, as a document, called the Constitution, the Bill of Rights.
Which is the Bill of Rights.
I know you sound like radical, but it's absolutely true. These fundamental principles, I think, are so important to all of us.
And they didn't honor them in Waco.
No.
And they're not honoring them today.
I went through the Constitution. I went through the Bill of Rights 4 days ago, and I found 6 direct violations in the Bill of Rights. 6 of our Bill of Rights absolutely violated by their actions.
That happened. David, the people in Waco were never a threat to the government or the people of Texas. Is that true?
I believe that to be true, yes.
Okay. And you lived in Waco for how many years?
I was only there for 2 years.
For 2 years, but you guys were never a threat. And they basically were going after David, and they could have picked him up at any time, okay? Now, when I saw the movie Waco Rules of Engagement, which I think everyone needs to see, incredible documentary.
Everyone does need to see that.
Everyone needs to see that, especially in this time of day. That you show the tanks. I can't believe these tanks going around this home with children and men and women. And what were your crime? Because they couldn't pick up David Koresh. They were sending tanks. They were blaring music. They were sending gas into your home. Children were burning from the gas. Why did they do that?
It's insanity.
It is insanity.
It's power-hungry madness.
It's like a war was going on against a small community.
King of the Mountain.
This funny little story. I was in a room one night during the siege, and I was talking with David, and Steve was there, and we had a radio, actually a shortwave, and we could pick up some of their communications between the tanks. And someone got out a transistor radio that we could actually communicate with the drivers in the tanks on their frequency. And someone said, "Hey, how's it going on out there in the free world?" And a voice came back and said, "It ain't free anymore."
And yeah,
it's interesting.
And maybe that's the message they want to give to America. But kind of like Germany, when nobody popped in to help.
Sure.
No one helped you guys either.
Nobody helped him, no.
You think of if you take the direct parallels of Germany and what Hitler did when he got into power, taking people's guns away, taking the rights of the people away, establishing so many laws to make almost anyone that they wanted to target a criminal under the German courts.
Yeah.
And actually, if you read the German gun laws from that time, they are very, very similar to the gun laws we have on the books now, and some of the gun laws they would like to pass. And now, because of September 11th, might just be able to do that. I mean, because of September 11th, they've now passed this bill where basically they can come into your house, a federal agent, if they think or have any suspicion that you're involved in terrorism, quote unquote, while you're at work, and search your house without you even knowing about it.
Well, what happened to the Fourth Amendment? Being safe and secure in your home and papers, unless there's a search warrant.
That's a great question.
Yeah, and what happened to the Second Amendment, right to bear arms? Why do we have 25,000 laws, against that Second Amendment?
And you get all these senators and congressmen every chance they get talking about the Constitution. And, the majority of the public doesn't even know the preamble of the Constitution anymore. They don't teach it in school anymore. It's very frightening to me. It's like, to me, if we have started this republic or democracy, what you want to call it, 200 and something years ago, we should see the plan through to the end. If we're going to be the beacon of the free world, as they like to say, we should see that plan through and abide by those guidelines.
Right here.
And you know what? Humanity hasn't changed that much. Our technology is better. Our firearms are better, if you will. I mean, we can wage war in so many ways now and destroy so many people's lives so much easier than we could 50, 100 years ago. But has humanity changed? People like to argue, and they like to say, well, the Constitution was written 200 years ago before we had all this insanity and technology. And it's like, if you study history, mankind's always been a little crazy. And they've always been a little power-hungry and bloodthirsty. And our forefathers understood that.
David, why did you survive Waco when so many people died?
Well, there were 9 people that exited the fire. 18 came out during the siege. People don't realize that. There was a period of time when the negotiations were going very smoothly, and every time an amount of people would exit the building, they would do something to provoke us to staying, and no one else wanted to come out. They'd start destroying our property, start running over boats and things like that, with the tanks.
They would destroy your property?
Oh, yeah. They took it during the 51-day siege. My gosh.
Everything.
They ran over all the motorcycles. They ran over the kids' tricycles.
They ran over the graves.
Yeah, we buried there was a gentleman buried out there, Peter Gent, in the front, and the tank purposely ran over the gravesite where we buried him over and over and over again. We would call outraged, and they didn't care. They just didn't care about us.
Vicious behavior, David.
But it's not that they didn't care. They were trying to aggravate you. They were trying to make you behave in a certain way, it sounds.
Yeah, but it did exactly. Now, that's interesting because the way it was almost phrased, what I was thinking is, and we had the opposite effect. My theory, my belief, is that the government talked a beautiful talk to the public. And behind closed doors, they did things that they knew would undermine the negotiations to cause the people to become more drawn together and become more of a family and not want to come out. It's like they did everything they could to assure that the negotiations would be compromised, and that's what they did.
Why are some of the people that were released from Waco, aren't they still in jail?
Yeah, there's 11 that are still in jail.
Why are they in jail, and why aren't you in jail?
That's a lengthy question. How long is the show?
We have another half hour about.
Okay. No, they are in jail. They were found guilty of aiding and abetting voluntary manslaughter. Now, everyone beat the murder charges. The conspiracy to commit murder was the count 1 the government was going for. Those charges...
Murder charges? They came after you with tanks, and you're charged with murder?
Exactly. They charged those people with murder. They all beat the charge, but the jury, because the judge had given the jury members an 87-page book of rules they have to follow when they're making deliberations, obviously confuse the jurors. That's another tactic they like to use, too, to get the result they wanted, which was some kind of conviction. And they got aiding and abetting voluntary manslaughter, and, they trumped this up like they won the murder charge or something. I mean, it's pretty insane. So those people... some of them should be getting out in 2003, some in 2004, some not.
But how
for a
come
very
you weren't
long
among
time
those?
afterwards.
How come you weren't among those charged?
There were several reasons. There was a few other younger guys that weren't. Most of them were from out of the country, so they were shipped back to their country. Some of the older people, obviously, weren't charged. I found out recently, I had a very interesting experience recently that no one really knows of yet. This is the first time I've talked about this on any kind of show, but I met Bill Johnson, who was one of the prosecuting attorneys working on behalf of the government against us. And real funny thing, Bill and I talked for about an hour, and Bill has been in trouble with the government because he exposed, or he let Mike McNulty go into the evidence locker here in Austin and basically get all the information of the pyrotechnic devices, and that's where the pyrotechnic devices came back into being a couple of years ago. A pyrotechnic devices is a CS gas cartridge that has the potential to burn. A pyrotechnic, it means it can cause a fire. And we found 3 or 4 of those in the evidence locker that the government had shot into the building, which is very scary. You know?
That's a smoking evidence.
Then confiscated them and hid them.
Well, they went after Bill, and Bill, he told me, I'll never forget it, he said, I went in to serve the country, and I became an attorney. I started to work for the Justice Department, federal marshal, all that. And, I believed that we were right all the time. That was how I was raised, U.S. is right. And he said, I really learned the hard way, Dave. I really learned the hard way that there's just more to the story, and it really opened my mind. And, if that's all it does is open people's minds to be able to accept the truth, and, I think it's a beautiful thing. There's nothing that can justify the sacrifice those people made. There's nothing that can justify what the government did. To this day, they're not standing up for what they did. I mean, we had a civil case in Waco against the government, which we lost.
You lost. Why?
We had about 10 to 15 of our expert witnesses. We had a guy from Dow Chemical come down who invented CS gas, invented methylene chloride. He invented the methylene chloride, which is the propellant of CS gas. And he was going to testify and said that the methylene chloride would have lulled the children into a sleep, the amount that they put in there, causing paralysis, coma, and death. And the judge did not let him on the stand. The judge refused to let 10 of our most important expert witnesses on the stand. The jury never got to hear that.
Don't you love the way they manipulate the court system?
Exactly how they manipulate the court systems. I mean, I had such a learning experience, not only from the whole thing, but just the civil case not too long ago. I brought my friend Johnny with me. We went to that trial. My friend, the producer for my band now here in Austin, David Prater, came. We walked out of that courtroom. Johnny turns to me and goes, I think I'm moving to Sweden. I can't believe what I just witnessed. I mean, it was shocking.
But see, if people don't watch Waco, the Rules of Engagement, if they don't read your book, A Place Called Waco, no one's going to know the other side of the story. No one's going to start investigating, hey, the government is doing some pretty evil things. And
Seinfeld's on.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I got my 6-pack of beer, and, I've been using my mind all day at work.
But, it's still very easy to pop that tape in, and they can learn some pretty interesting information.
Absolutely. And I think it's important for everyone, as you said, to know this information. I mean, learn from the sacrifices that others have made, people. I mean, the sacrifices have been made all through history. The good, the bad, the ugly. This nation was founded on sacrifices, on people fighting the Revolutionary War against the British. And the forefathers creating this document, if you will, knowing that had they been caught, had England won, all of them would have hung. All of them would have been hung as traitors instead of being heroes today.
What do you think Janet Reno thinks when she realizes there were children?
I don't know what Janet Reno thinks, but I'm glad you brought that up. I read a quote recently that came out in 1993. I believe it was after Waco. It was in USA Magazine, or U.S. Magazine, I believe. And I'm going to try to paraphrase because I don't have the quote here.
Okay.
But she said, oh boy, what was it? It was so powerful. She said that if we believe that people are a threat it was her definition of a cult. And a cult is anyone who is involved in a religion where they meet and talk about the Scripture, anyone who supports that religion by giving financially to the church. We believe that people like that are a threat, and we will go after them. I mean, the quote was much more in-depth than that, but just knowing that an attorney general said this in an interview blew me away. I couldn't believe what I'd read.
But that describes almost any church.
Exactly. It describes I won't say a majority anymore. I don't know how many people in America. I think there's like 93% believe in God, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know how many Christians there are, but certainly there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in this country. I mean, there's,
I mean, people believe in the Bible. People read the Bible. People get, not confidence, but what's the word I'm looking
Comfort?
for? Comfort in the Bible. Stories,
Journal
answers.
forgiveness, grace.
Yes.
All the things we're supposed to have as human beings, and how we're supposed to treat people as if they were God. The bum on the street could be God. That's the whole lesson plan. So don't spit on them. Help them out. Would you help out God? Because you just might be. By helping the person next to you out, you're helping out God. That's, in essence, what the Scripture teaches. I mean, it's much more complicated than that, obviously.
Well, as I said, the Bill of Rights Day, the birthday is tomorrow, December 15th, and people need to start celebrating the Bill of Rights because the government is trampling. And look what happened with the World Trade Center. What do you think about that?
I think it's insane. The act is insane. I think how we're approaching it really should leave this country to leave us in retrospect. I mean, we should analyze our foreign policy and find out what led to this kind of madness, this kind of hatred against the United States, and change some of those things. Let's try to make a positive out of it. The bills that are coming down the pike are incredibly frightening. There was another bill they passed where if you're considered a terrorist and you're in jail, your attorney-client conversations can be monitored now by a federal employee.
No more attorney-client confidentiality?
Yes, this passed 3 weeks ago, I believe.
So we have no privacy anymore. We have no rights, essentially.
If they label you a terrorist, you don't.
But anyone can be labeled a terrorist now.
Sure, anyone can be labeled a Jew or a homosexual or a gypsy. Who else did Hitler kill? That's exactly what he did. Labeled and excite the public hatred to conceal his own abuses and encroachments. And we seem to be following that same scenario, that same pattern in this world, in this country, in this day and age. And it's incredibly scary that we haven't learned from the recent past, the last 50 years.
David? I wanted
yes, ma'am. Yes, Mother.
Hi.
How you doing?
I wanted to say something, and then I wanted you to sort of comment on the power of propaganda. I've said all along that regardless of what people think of David, he spent years putting his community together and, putting it together and working with the community and teaching.
Talking to other religious leaders and rabbis.
Right. But it took the federal government 51 days to control the minds of everyone in this country.
Good
and
point.
one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I wanted you to comment on, when Dr. Crow, bless his heart, and I will never forget him as long as I live because he was the coroner who looked at most of the bodily remains after the total destruction and devastation.
Great man, yeah.
We went on a show together, and David and Dr. Crow and I talked together beforehand because there was information that was very, very painful to listen to. And Dave and Dr. Crow wanted to make sure that I heard it before we got up and we went on the show because it was going to deal with David's wife in Waco and her 3 little daughters who were daughters of David Koresh's, daughters that we had begun a personal relationship with, and also our friend Julie, my friend Julie too, who died with her 5 children, the devastation that happened to the children with CS gas, and also the fact that people might have, there was a lot of criticism about the community of people committing suicide inside Mount Carmel in the last minutes as though it were some sort of a great horrific sin. And Dr. Crow tried to tell the people that if you were making a choice at the last moment between dying of fire or dying horribly of gassing, and you had the opportunity to shoot yourself or to shoot your loved one, that is probably what you would do, and yet people criticized. Now, with the Twin Trade Towers, we have seen that, a horrific number of people made the decision, instead of facing 2,000 degrees of fire, they chose to jump. A lot of compassion is being spoken to for the people who made that decision. It was a horrible decision to make, and we can never understand their horror, and we shouldn't. It's like we can never understand the horror of the people in Mount Carmel who had the opportunity to shoot themselves or their loved ones, or the horror of the people that didn't even have the opportunity to do that. But to take and castigate the Mount Carmel community for making a decision like that, and then to show reverence and love and understanding and compassion for another group of people who have had to make the same decision, shows us the incredible, just evil power of propaganda, and how insipid this propaganda is used, and how incredibly invasive it is when it's used well.
And probably the best book I can think of that you can read on the subject of propaganda and being controlled and manipulated by the press and by the government is Noam Chomsky, Manufacturing Consent, pretty much says it all. You know, that they manufacture consent. When there's a war, you only hear what they want you to hear. I mean, the amount of information that's withheld from the American public is incredibly substantial. And from their point of view, it has to be. They couldn't get away with the acts that they're committing throughout the world. Nicaragua, Panama, Chile, I mean, list goes on and on.
And we think that if we don't know this information, it's okay, but what we don't realize is how much it's hurting everybody in this country.
Oh, yeah.
By not knowing the information.
Yeah, we're giving our rights away. You know, our rights have been turned into privileges now, and that's what they want. The sheeple.
What is the one thing, David, that you really would love people to know about Mount Carmel?
I think one thing I would love people to know about Mount Carmel is that, you know, everybody that was there because they wanted to be there. They were there because what they were learning was better than anything they'd seen on TV, better than any book they'd read. It was a life choice that wasn't an easy one. You know, I mean, we washed our clothes in buckets. We did everything probably as self-sufficient as you can. And I think that creates within the people that live a lifestyle like that a certain spirit. It's obviously not a spirit that I would have discipline for had I not met David and not met the community there. It's probably a discipline that most people listening to me don't have. But it was also a challenge to every person there to come into a harmony together and to kind of focus on our life and our world and where we're going. You know, there's a scripture that says, better you spend a day at a funeral than a party. Because when you're at a funeral, you're contemplating eternity. You're contemplating the end, and you're thinking about God. Whereas at a party, you're being frivolous and having a great time and just kind of forgetting the cares of the world. As I think, you know, I certainly tend to probably go more the second round. But it's definitely something that everyone should pause and reflect upon the Creator and everything He's given us, everything that we have. The inspiration for the document called the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, I believe was God-inspired, just as I believe the Scripture was God-inspired. I think there's a parallel there. And if we don't heed the lesson, we're going to be doomed to repeat the past.
David, what happened to Mount Carmel now? I mean, they burnt it down, they got rid of the evidence. Is there a community still there?
There is. Most of the survivors that were involved with Koresh are elderly. A lot of them are dying. Some of 3 or 4 of the older people have died since everyth's happened. Clive Doyle lives out there. Clive's mother died recently. There's a few other people that have come, if you will, out of the woodwork to find out what David was teaching. There's also other groups of Davidians that were associated with Mount Carmel before David came into play, before David kind of took over the community. and two different factions have kind of settled on the property, and it's pretty interesting dynamic when you go out there, because you have these 2 or 3 different versions of Davidians, and there's only like I think one survivor that actually lives out there at this point, being Clive Doyle. And the fact that these people can still live together I think is incredibly impressive, because these people live for Scripture, and their doctrines are very different. And as we know, having different doctrines have probably killed more people in the world history than anything else has been over religion, has been over the Scripture. So, I kind of look at that as a part of how it is to be. Smite the shepherd, the sheep shall be scattered. Right now, everyone who's out, several of them are in different countries, some of them live in different parts of the United States, and it's almost like a fulfillment.
Are you still part of the group, an active part of the group?
I wouldn't say active part of the group. I go to the memorials. It's something that will always be with me, and it's something that an experience this incredible you're always going to share with the people you went through it, just as if you were in World War II together. Your war buddies are always in the back of your mind. It's kind of like that for me. I tend to take a little more progressive approach. In other words, I'm still always, ever open-minded to all things. If the Scripture's true, I want to find out scientifically why it's true. Or if it isn't true, was there a worldwide flood? I'm always asking these kinds of questions. So I kind of read for myself, discover for myself, and live my life doing to the best of my ability what I believe my greatest talent is, which is music.
And has that been going strong since you left?
It's been, in the last couple of years, it's been pretty amazing here in Austin. I've met the right group of people. I'm in a 3-piece band. Tentatively, we're called Plush. Our album's getting ready to come out in January.
And what's the name of it?
Plush.
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 All right, that sounds really nice.
Well, it's actually it's pretty amazing rock and roll. I mean, I went to the studio last night and heard some of the stuff the guys have been doing, and I can't believe that it's me playing on the CD. I just think it's going to be an excellent album. And
can they get this at Border Books?
When it comes out, hopefully you'll be able to get it anywhere.
Excellent.
Play our cards right.
Now, I hear that...
Fortunately, we're all marketing geniuses, so I'm sure we'll be able to work something out.
Now, I hear that the community of Waco got together and rebuilt a church for Mount Carmel. Is that true?
Actually, people all over the country got together and rebuilt the church. There was a man here named Alex Jones who, kind of a radical guy, but definitely his heart's in the right place. He's very effective. He's got a national show, and he drummed up support from all over the... People came from Connecticut to help drive nails. People came from all over giving materials, giving money, giving their time to rebuild our church right on the ground where the original church was, and it's standing there to this day. And that's where we have the memorials. That's where the people on Saturday, as the people that are out there, the small group, still respect and honor the Sabbath, which is from Friday night to Saturday night, and they go out there on Saturday and have a study that Clive generally directs.
Now, I know what a lot of people around here think when they think of Waco, and I wish they had the accurate information, and that's why I really want them to watch the movie and read your book. But what about the people in Waco? How do they treat Mount Carmel today?
Well, they treat the people okay. I mean, there's not open hostility as there was during the time, during 1993.
So the people in Waco believe the government?
Oh, most of them, yeah. Absolutely.
Even in Waco?
Yes, I do. The majority do. It was, to them, they look at it as David Koresh being a blight on their beautiful town. And they certainly don't want anything to do with him.
But they didn't hate him before the siege.
Mm-hmm.
Huh, interesting.
It is pretty interesting. Well, that's what the press can do. I mean, when you're Waco proud, as some of the banners said.
That's
they put banners up. Thank you, Waco, for all your support. I mean, it's just, their PR group is certainly in place and was in place then.
Well, what about the sheriff?
Jack Harwell. He was, I'd like to say, on our side. I mean, he definitely believe that the feds coming in and doing what they did on his territory outraged him. But really, to an extent, his hands were tied. I mean, there's not much you can do when the FBI comes in and brings, 3,000 of their favorite agents and starts to basically take the town over. I mean, that's power. What are you going to do about that? And he had this, I think, internal struggle. I mean, he definitely wanted to see the kids come out safely. He wanted to see the people come out safely. And I think he really did his best, but I think his hands were tied,
He was devastated too, David. I mean, he really was devastated by federal government's actions, and I think he was pretty humiliated by it.
Absolutely.
David, where can people get your video, Waco Rules of Engagement?
Okay. Well...
Now, this was up for an Academy Award, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. I'm going to shoot myself in the foot here and say that the easiest place you can access it, the video and my book, a place called Waco, is Amazon.com.
Okay.
It's actually, my book is cheaper through Amazon than it is anywhere else that I've seen.
Okay, but they can get your book at Borders.
Hopefully.
Yeah, they'll special order it at
Hey, a lot of them were sent back. It's not exactly a popular subject.
Yeah.
Well, people
they will order it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can get it also. My website is a place called Waco.com.
A place called Waco.com is your website. Okay.
Yeah.
And they can get your CD called Plush there too?
Not yet. It's got to be released first. But definitely, we're going to tie that in with the band website once all that takes place, and it's just a matter of having product before you start tooting your own horn,
Now, I hear you got married again.
Yeah.
And you have a little girl.
I sure do.
And I think she's being shown on the screen along with your picture.
Oh, no, they're showing my picture.
Well, it's the picture of you and Dylan when
the audience. Come on.
you were still in California, because when she's still, before all of her beautiful blonde hair grew in.
Uh-huh.
So it's that last picture you all took before you left the little house in California.
You mean the little apartment?
Yeah. It's good looking. It's a great picture.
The little apartment right off Sunset Boulevard where insanity took place everywhere around us.
That's right.
Belinda, what would you...
I highly recommend Austin over L.A. to any musicians out there listening.
Oh, really? You like Austin? Okay.
Austin's amazing.
Much cleaner.
Belinda, we only have 2 minutes left. What would you like the audience to remember?
I'd like the audience to remember that that we are manipulated and our minds are turned very quickly, and that when that's happening to us, we're not being in touch with ourselves. Because I think part of the pride of being an American, even the pride of being a New Englander, and I think New England really sadly was manipulated by the actions in Waco by the federal government. New Englanders know better. We think deeper. That when we see this happening, or we're watching it happening, that we've got to understand and we've got to remember we're getting such a small percentage of the information that if we don't take the initiative individually to find out more, we do not deserve the freedoms that we imagine we have already.
I'd like to say that, there's two different ways of thought out there. Bumper stickers that say U.S. love it or leave it, and bumper stickers that say U.S. love it and change it. And I have to agree with the second. I mean, if we're going to be thoughtful people and we're going to live in an intelligent society, we have to progress and not degress. And when you just put your patriotism into something so full-heartedly without knowing what's going on around you, then those very freedoms that you tend to cater to and tote when you're speaking to people are going to be violated, and they're going to be lost, and they're going to be given up. And you're going to be one of the people giving them up if you don't study, learn, seek, and try to do the right thing. It starts by treating your fellow man the way you'd like to be treated, and it ends with, I don't think it ever ends, but certainly a progressive form of communication would be to tell people what you know, tell people what you've learned, and if they're closed-minded to, if they don't want to hear it, that's their bad. That's their wrong.
David, we're all out of time. Thank you for joining us. Belinda, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, it was wonderful. Thank you so much, Kelly.
You want to go out and you want to watch this video, Waco Rules of Engagement. You want to buy the book. You want to read the book, A Place Called Waco. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.